Welcome to Buck Life, the Hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fan podcast made by Hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans for Hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans. I'm Jacob Anderson. This is a very special show today. This is our first live broadcast ever. So if you're watching us live, we really appreciate it. And if you're listening to us, we still appreciate it. Joining me as always is my co-host Chuck Schilling. Chuck, how are you today?
Not too bad. It's an exciting day. It's been overall, in my feelings, it's been kind of a quiet trade deadline so far, particularly for the Bucks. Nothing brewing quite yet. It's kind of waiting to see what happens. Yeah,
we haven't heard much. Somebody who I'm sure will hear before quite a lot of other people will is our guest for today, Mr. Dan Helsel, a.k.a. the Grand Admiral. Welcome again, Dan. Is this 3 times for you now?
I believe it's my fourth.
Yeah.
You might be the leader in the clubhouse then, as far as appearances on the show. But we always appreciate having you on, especially given your expertise. And today it's especially relevant given that it is the trade deadline, and having somebody with a bevy of knowledge as far as the collective bargaining agreement and just how these trades can be structured is always a good thing. So, yeah, very good to have you.
Thank you.
We're going to talk right away about the Bucks, I suppose. Not really a lot of concrete rumors going on. We did see one major trade that involved a lot of former Bucks.
Bucks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tobias Harris goes from Orlando to Detroit in exchange for Brandon Jennings and Ersan Ilyasova, which on the surface looks like a steal of a deal for Detroit. And it, to me, further proof that Scott Skiles has no idea what the hell is going on in his own head, let alone with his team. So thoughts on the trade? Who wins? I mean, is it clearly Detroit? I mean, right?
Yeah, to me, it's clearly Detroit. There's just no way, Brandon Jennings and Ersan had no future there. Tobias potentially does have a future. I think it's better for them now and in the future. I don't know what Orlando is getting out of this.
Orlando, I have no idea why they would do this. I mean, I understand they're high on Aaron Gordon, but they basically just gave away Tobias Harris. I mean, I know we're all familiar with doing that.
I was going to say, giving away Tobias Harris.
But I mean, hey, Skiles was already gone when we gave away Tobias Harris last time, so he just wanted to experience it for himself, maybe. I don't know. But it doesn't make sense. I mean, Brandon Jennings is an unrestricted free agent this offseason, and Ersan Ilyasova has 1 year left on his deal with at $8.4 million with $400,000 of that guaranteed. I don't know why you would do this for Orlando. There's no pick. They're getting no pick out of the deal.
That's what I was waiting when I heard the trade go down. I'm like, there's got to be some sort of picks going somewhere, but whether they be protected. But no, that was it.
Right, like a top 15 protected first round pick or something going to Orlando. Like, okay. That makes sense, but no.
Yeah, it's a salary dump, but they're not really at a position in their life cycle that they really need to be worried about salary dumps. It'd be a much different situation if they're looking at competing this year, next year, or whatever. But they're just not at a point where it should matter to them whatsoever. I just don't get it. I did want to say one thing since we're live here. If you see us looking at our phones or iPads, we're following the trade deadline just like the rest of you. If anything big happens, you're going to get on-air live reaction from us. I'm going to do my best to. The last couple episodes, I've dropped quite a few 4-letter words since some of you might be watching at work and whatnot. I will try to keep that to a minimum, but if we trade a trade similar to the Tobias Harris trade, if we do something like that, I cannot make any promises that I will not lose my cool.
Well, it's funny you mentioned looking at the phones and stuff, because I just got a text as you were saying it from somebody who's given me some scoops before, saying Caron Butler to Milwaukee, and then immediately after that he sends me LOL, never mind, just got trolled. So yeah. That's the kind of stuff you can expect at the trade deadline.
Hey, if anyone ends up watching NBA TV later when they replay some of their coverage, you'll see David Aldridge looking down on his phone the whole time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Or anytime if you watch Adam Schefter on any ESPN broadcast, he's like the NFL guy.
He's got 6 phones.
Yeah, every time he's looking to see what's going on.
Yeah.
So, but we talked about Orlando and Detroit. Both made also additional trade moves so far. Orlando traded Channing Frye in a 3-team deal. He's going to Cleveland, who I'm guessing want more shooters. They're looking at a showdown with Golden State potentially, or San Antonio in the finals, would be their thought process. But Anderson Varejao goes from Cleveland to Portland, who is waiving him, and Portland is getting a protected first-round pick, I believe, from Cleveland in that deal. And I have to double-check on what goes to
I was just going to say,
deal.
I'd like to see what goes to Orlando in that deal.
We'll bring that up. But
like I said, we're doing this live, and I see we've got a couple viewers so far. We are on early. We promised we'd start actually about half an hour from now, but we're all ready. And what else are we going to do on a Thursday afternoon in Milwaukee when it's the middle of winter?
Well, I've been for the past 15 years now, I've always cleared my schedule for the trade deadline. That this is what I do on this day. I keep track of
the trade deadline.
Yep.
This is the first time you're having a chance to talk about it. We just picked up another viewer. It has a little viewer count down there. People who've realized we're on air early. 4 viewers right now. So we'll see how that picks up as we get closer to the trade deadline. I imagine if the Bucks do something big, that number will probably jump up a little bit. Other than that, it'll probably steadily creep up. So
I hope so.
I have to imagine a bunch of you watching are following along at work, or maybe you're working second shift or something like that. But welcome along as we see what happens. Jake and Dan are both staring at their phones trying to figure out what exactly the trade is. Here we go.
Orlando got Jared Cunningham from the Cavaliers as well as a second-round pick from the Blazers. So the Blazers appear to be they've made a couple other moves to it looks like just kind of picking up salary in exchange for picks. So they're kind of going the route that I wish the Bucks would take this year, next year. I mean, until they're ready to compete, I'd really like to see the Bucks do more moves like that. But I did mention Detroit made another move as well as picking up Tobias Harris. They're really making a run for the playoffs this year. They picked up Donatas Motiejunas. I think I said that right.
That is correct.
And that's impressive.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that
I got really nervous right before I said it because I'm like, I'm going to fuck this up. But no, they got, again, Donatas Motiejunas from the Houston Rockets in exchange for a top 8 protected first-round pick in the 2016 NBA draft coming up. So they're clearly making that 8th seed run, at least that we've seen in past years from the Bucks. Although I must say, if they're going to do it, they seem to be doing it right. I mean, those are the 2 guys that are pretty much young players, but not super, super young. They're coming into their prime, and maybe they could be big-time players for them coming forward. I really like Motiejunas, a 7-footer that can stretch the floor. He's pretty mobile and multifaceted big. So giving away Ersan, I think that's an upgrade to Motiejunas easily.
Well, definitely. And I mean, they're replacing Ersan with Motiejunas and Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris will play power forward for them as well. And Motiejunas can play center behind Drummond and power forward. So
yeah, I think he could play next to Drummond and be a really good fit as well.
Yes.
I feel like Detroit is right now, obviously it's very early in the trade deadline, but they're the early winner so far in my book in terms of what they're doing for this season.
They're going for it now. The only thing is, I mean, what are they really going for? I don't know. Like I don't know what Detroit's ceiling is. Now they do have an elite player in Andre Drummond, so that's important. And I guess they can try to grow this way. They are. Tobias Harris and Monty. I don't know how young Motiejunas is anymore, but he's not too old.
Right. I will say, maybe you look on the surface, you don't see Detroit as contenders, but I would say if there was ever a year where maybe you could sneak in and get an upset and make a run in the playoffs, this seems like it in the Eastern Conferences. There's just a lot of question marks from top to bottom. I mean, Cleveland's not playing as well as they were last year. They've been involved in all sorts of rumors involving Kevin Love, trying to move him for maybe a better fit around LeBron. You just mentioned, I didn't even realize Chicago's sitting at the 7th seed, which to me, it seems like a week ago they were the 2 seed. I realized that they're kind of a mess right now, but I didn't realize that it had gotten that bad. I haven't checked the standings in a while. You look, there's a team like Boston who they've been involved in every rumor under the sun because of all the assets that they have. They're just a team of, I look at these guys and I'm like, who the hell are these guys? So I think it'd be interesting to see them maybe go and get that Kevin Love type player with, maybe some sort of 3-team deal. So the Eastern Conference this year, maybe it's up for grabs. Who knows?
Yeah, and Matawan, he's 25 years
25,
old.
So he fits that correct age to be part of the young core.
To me, Detroit it's definitely a go for it this year move, but all the players are young enough that it's not really It's not like they're trading away young assets for expiring vets. They're actually trading away older veteran players for young assets and going for it. This is the definition of going for it while building for the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, Brandon Jennings is a little bit younger than like Jeff Teague, but it'd be equivalent to like, they traded him and got younger.
Right.
They traded him and got younger. Now, I do want to, before we talk more about other teams, a couple things. Apparently, and this is from Jason Kidd to the media, Jared Bayless injured his knee last night, and he will have an MRI on it. So he's not going anywhere.
That is terrible news for the trade deadline. Some sort of practice injury then, I'm assuming?
Apparently. Well, I mean, the Bucks made a big deal of having a practice last night and then, tweeting out photos of it and like back to work and like unity and just terrible. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but so great. So Bayless got hurt.
Question is this a phantom injury or is it a real injury?
I don't know.
And we'll never know. But
I mean, I would have preferred to trade him, but I guess my second preference is to have him injured the rest of the year, so he's not out there jacking up shots and taking them away from our young players.
Real quick, not to interrupt, because I'll probably do it several times during the show, just based on
it's gonna happen.
It's a live show.
But okay, the thing about Caron Butler, somebody at 105.7 FM retweeted a tweet from 2013 when the Bucks acquired Caron Butler, and that's why everybody started freaking out that Caron Butler. The tweet that they tweeted out was, let me see here. I just had it up there. I think they got rid of it now, but it was one source close to talks tells ESPN that Caron Butler has been informed that he will indeed wind up with Bucks team, hashing out details. So I see like my timeline, people like, oh my God, what the hell? Why? Like, Ted Davis apparently tweeted about it.
August 28th, 2013.
Solid troll job from whoever did that.
Whoever pulled that off, and you have to imagine if 1250 retweeted it, someone probably sent it to them saying, hey, did you see this or whatever.
Yeah, whatever
it's not just going to magically show up in your timeline. That's not how Twitter works. Unlike Facebook, where it'll randomly put the posts out of order because Facebook's dumb. Twitter keeps them chronological.
That sounds like something Sparky would fall for.
Someone trolled 1250 and then it got a bunch of people. Well played, whoever did that. Well played.
Yes. So keep in mind, by the way, as you're following along, I've seen people retweet things from Bleacher Report, but always look at the actual Twitter handle, because there's a Twitter handle, Bleacher, spelled with 2 E's instead of EA, and somehow it's still fooling people out there.
Well, and how far have we come in a couple of years since Bleacher Report was bought out and turned into a legitimate news organization? Right. Whereas a few years ago, you wouldn't dare have retweeted anything from Bleacher Report.
Nope, Bleacher Report did not read.
Exactly. That was the thing until they were bought out by CBS, I believe. Someone bought
Turner.
Yeah,
Turner Sports.
Okay, there you go. I knew someone bought it.
So another update here, Sports Nation. I'm not familiar with the reporter, but looks like a legit article. It is that the possible Ricky Rubio trade to the Bucks fell apart. So the Bucks reportedly made a.
We're both
I know.
Okay with that type of move, depending on what went out.
Yep. Apparently, the Bucks made a last-ditch effort, but it was once again for naught, according to the report. So
interesting. I wonder who could have been involved in a deal like that.
I mean, I would think definitely somebody like Rashad Vaughn and other pieces that
maybe our pick, some sort of protection. I imagine, because I don't think anybody's going to give up a lottery ticket for Ben Simmons or Brandon Ingram at this point.
Now, I mean, it makes no sense if you're Minnesota to make that trade, but they've made a lot of questionable decisions in the past few years. So I just wanted to take advantage of that, but unfortunately, our front office is usually the front office that is taken advantage of. So hard to take advantage of other front offices.
Well, we talked about Jared Bayless. He's, by all accounts, looks to be staying in Milwaukee, barring him being just salary involved in some deal. But there was a deal that was made. Oklahoma City traded for Randy Foye, the guard from the Denver Nuggets. In exchange, they gave up Steve Novak DJ Augustine, and 2 second-round picks. So if you are wondering maybe what a Jared Bayless, what kind of value he might have brought back in a trade, I think that's a pretty decent indicator. And I know Oklahoma City was a team that maybe there was some speculation would be interested in a guy like Bayless, looking for some veteran help and another shooter to go on a run against the Golden States and the San Antonios of the world. But yeah, we were just talking about Ricky Rubio. I know Bucks have been linked to a lot of point guards, Ricky Rubio being one. Jeff Teague is like the Bucks ghost of Christmas past that keeps coming back up.
Yes.
But to me, it just says that they probably don't see Michael Carter-Williams as a long-term future piece, certainly not as a starter if you continue to hear these names. And particularly now with a guy like Rubio, I mean, he's a real tone setter for your team and a true point guard in that aspect. So it appears that maybe kids playing the game of roulette, trying to find that right fit at point guard, and maybe somebody, again, more like him. He tried it with Michael Carter-Williams. Doesn't look like it's working out. So back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we're not just settling for Michael Carter-Williams and that we're trying to upgrade the position. I'm very glad about that. It is interesting, though, like at this point, you've really got to move on from Michael Carter-Williams, you would think. I mean, unless he's just the ultimate professional. Think about this. If you're Michael Carter-Williams, you finish out last season with the Bucks, but then last offseason, they try to hedge their bets on you by trading a first-round pick and a second-round pick for Grievous Vasquez, with the idea being that he'll help push Michael Carter-Williams. And there are many Bucks officials that are on record about that. Obviously, that did not work out well, but we already tried that. And then now we're linked to Jeff Teague, Drew Holiday, Ricky Rubio. Michael Carter-Williams has been pulled from the starting lineup multiple times. The last 2 games, we started O.J. Mayo at point guard for some bizarre reason. Just coming back from injury, he was awful in both of those games.
Well, that him starting as well as Miles Plumlee was interesting because they both barely played being starters. So clearly it was just a tone-setting thing. On the positive side, Greg Monroe looked great coming off the bench. I mean, not only numbers-wise, but watching him, the eye test, he seemed like he had more energy and almost reinvigorated coming off the bench. And I did see a tweet that Jason Kidd plans to go with that lineup on Friday with Monroe and Michael Carter-Williams coming off the bench, which to me, I don't know, maybe it gives me a little bit of hope that in the next 20 minutes or so, maybe that they're still open to moving those guys.
Maybe. And you wonder if that played a role in the reports that Monroe had told the Bucks apparently that he would like to be traded to the Pelicans.
That's it. We should get into that.
Which is where he's from.
Right. That's why it seems to have a little bit more legs. I'm looking at the Pelicans, and as a fan of the team, what I want them to be doing, which is, acquiring picks and, being flexible salary-wise. Looking at New Orleans, they don't really have a lot that interests me roster-wise. The only thing that I could see coming back would be, their pick in the first round this year, maybe next year, a protected pick, because I don't see a lot of fits as far as on the team. They're kind of stuck in no man's land, and I really kind of feel for Anthony Davis because they're stuck with guys like Tyreke Evans and Drew Holiday, who are very talented players, but I don't think are necessarily more than just above average starters. To me, having those guys inked long term, it kind of hamstrings them, and maybe Anthony Davis starts to get sick of the mediocrity because that's the situation they could be looking at there.
The Pelicans have been making the same mistake with Anthony Davis that the Cavs did the first time around with LeBron. They went for it way too early. They traded the 6th pick in the draft for Drew Holiday just because they're like, this was after Anthony Davis's second year in the league.
I remember that trade and wondering about it. It seemed very strange at the time. We also were part of another point guard that was linked to the Bucks was Drew Holiday. Again, I think he's a little bit better, more impactful player than Michael Carter-Williams, but he doesn't accomplish much one way or the other to me as far as rebuilding or going for it kind of thing. It's just kind of a stagnant move. And we saw last year when you acquire Michael Carter-Williams, it takes a while for a point guard to get inundated into the team and the offense and that. So really, maybe that's again a shuffle the deck type move more so than a definitive direction.
I mean, at least with Drew Holiday, and I know I just criticized the Pelicans for going for this, but part of that was because the Pelicans should have stayed bad for longer and gotten higher picks. Drew Holiday is at least young enough. He's 25 that you could, fit him into that core. Unlike Jeff Teague, by the way, who's going to be 28. So
sorry to interrupt. We have a Woj bomb. The Phoenix Suns have apparently traded Markieff Morris to the Washington Wizards. So wonder what will be coming back to Phoenix in that kind of deal, which
you knew Markieff Morris was going to be traded. I just feel sorry for any team that acquires him. That's not Detroit.
I can't believe that it actually took him this long to trade him. I mean, for the toxic situation that was, and that's an outright tank move to keep a guy like that on the team, but also to continue to give him significant minutes.
I was watching the Phoenix Suns versus Golden State Warriors game live, and all of a sudden the announcers are like, it appears Markieff Morris is fighting one of his teammates on the bench. And he literally was. He was getting into a fight. I forget who the teammate was. It might have been Goodwin. I don't recall. But, I mean, that's terrible. I would not touch that player. And, Washington continues to be a mess.
Washington's been a mess for a long time. They show promise here and there. They get a player like John Wall and Bradley Beal, and they make the playoffs a couple of years. But they're kind of been like the Bucks, stuck in mediocrity. Their ceiling they hit a little higher, and they have a legit all-star person in Wall and Bradley Beal are at that level. But I don't know what they're doing with this trade. I don't know why they're making this trade.
I don't know, unless they're getting a positive asset to take him. I doubt it, but that Washington is one of those teams. I mean, they have a terrible coach in Randy Whitman that should have been fired, but they upset Toronto in the first round last year, so they decided not to. And they have a terrible general manager in Ernie Grunfeld, who's been with them forever. Apparently Ernie Grunfeld and John Hammond just know how to keep their jobs no matter what. Despite any track record.
Well, it's funny you mention that because it actually kind of reminds me of the Bucks in a couple ways. Like John Hammond winning that Phantom Executive of the Year award in the Fear of the Year where he really struck gold. How much longer has that kept a job for him? And what I'm a little bit worried about is the Bucks being ahead of schedule in the rebuild last year, making it to the 6th seed and making a little bit of noise in the first round. How much is that going to play into maybe some guys that are in the office now getting more of a longer leash and maybe making some moves?
It definitely did. It both as fun as the Fear the Deer year was, and we were very much a part of it, the three of us in Squad 6, and it was great. I mean, it was phenomenal. It was a lot of fun, but it definitely set the organization back.
Wow. Okay. It just came through. The Suns are getting a first-round pick from Washington. It's protected. I don't know what the protection is on it, but that seems
I don't care what the
crazy to me.
Is.
To me, if you're taking that on, a toxic player like that, I mean, you would maybe be the one getting the pick in return. I don't know. It's a very, very strange move to me.
Washington is desperate. They're desperate. I mean, Markieff Morris is a very talented player, and they're just hoping that they can make it work. Unfortunately, Randy Whitman is their head coach. How is he going to manage a personality like Markieff Morris?
Yeah,
that's a desperation.
That's a questionable trade, and I want Washington. Actually, I'm not a fan of theirs, but I want them to do well since my brother-in-law works there.
That's true. Zach Grimm, friend of the show.
He. I'd be curious what he's feeling. I mean, he's probably at work right now. He's probably up in because he works in the office in game operations, so he's probably there.
He's got to work on those new Markieff Morris.
I just see a tweet from
player headshots.
At Adam McGee. If the Wizards didn't protect that pick 1 through 29, is not a good negotiator. I don't know. I wouldn't have given up a second-round pick, so I think he's dumb either way. But it does say to me that maybe he really is on the hot seat this year, as well as Whitman. They need to make the playoffs, otherwise it's done. Because, as you said, that screams of desperation. Coming through from Zach Lowe now, Chris Humphries and DeJuan Blair are also going to Phoenix, I assume, to make the salaries work.
Yes,
as part of the deal. Just
I
maybe
mean,
that ends up being the biggest move, but it's certainly a headline grabber. But I don't know if it's necessarily for basketball reasons. Maybe they reroute him to Detroit, as you said, that you get the baby brothers back together.
Yeah. So for anyone out there watching, if you want to contribute at all, and I'll say this time in here and there, you know, if you have a question or a comment, just feel free to chime in on Facebook. Also on the Google Hangout. That's actually where we're broadcasting this, through Google Hangouts, which then goes on to YouTube Live. So if you have any questions, or I believe you can call in and join the conversation. I'm not entirely sure how that works. I was trying to play around with it, but I'm limited in terms of how many computers and bandwidth I have here. I may step away and go to my other computer and try to call in and see what happens. But so yeah, if you want to join the conversation, at minimum, you can ask questions and comments on Facebook, and we'll do our best to incorporate everyone there. We're about 10 minutes away from the deadline, and hopefully, I'd imagine things are going to start heating up here in the next, say, half an hour, because usually we find things out a little after the deadline.
I just want to say we might be a little unsure of how it's going to work to communicate with you at Google Hangouts, but you know, John Hammond is experiencing the same problem with real regular telephones.
But that's because he uses a rotary phone. So
yes.
Let's be fair. He doesn't even have a touch screen. He doesn't even have a flip phone. He uses a good old rotary phone, which is old reliable to him.
Okay, so I just got a text. I don't know. It wasn't on Twitter, but it does say that the pick is supposedly top 9 protected.
For how long? I mean,
I don't know if that's this year, next year, but I also do want to point out that Markieff Morris, several people either through text messages or Twitter have taken to calling him Queef. So I just always like that word.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, moving on from that, we'll see if, like you said, about 10 minutes, we'll see what else comes through the ticker here. Another name that I heard linked was Mirza Teletovic, who has previously played for Jason Kidd. He's kind of a stretch 4. I think he plays a little bit of 3 as well. But he, I think with Phoenix is where he's playing this year, correct? But maybe they're just going to be dropping some more people now. I know that was a name that was linked to the Bucks as well. So we'll.
He is indeed with Phoenix, by the way, 6'9" power forward. And yes, he did play with the Nets while Kidd was there, and we were linked to him in the offseason as well. I'd like to point out that although the deadline is technically 9 minutes away at 2 p.m. Central, as long as the teams inform the league office that they're working on a deal, and the league office, you know, has some reason to believe them, both, you know, more than one team usually has to contact. They do most of this stuff by email now. They can work on it all the way up until 11 p.m. Central. The league office,
midnight Eastern.
Yeah, midnight Eastern, where the league office is located in New York. So they stay open for this stuff.
And depending what happens, we might be on the air for a while. I know Jake has to work at 9 o'clock, but Dan and I's schedule are wide open. So
yeah.
Google Hangouts
all night.
They have an 8-hour limit. When you start broadcasting, it says you can broadcast for up to 8 hours. So we started at about 1:30 Central. So 9:30 Central is I could start a second hangout, just restart. But I don't anticipate us going 8 hours.
Now this did happen. Yeah, and I hate to bring up this particular trade, but this did happen.
Dan, you know, you can't lie. You love bringing this up.
Well, so in yes,
I know exactly where he's going. So we got rid of his most hated player ever,
which is not true, by the way, not true. But they love to perpetuate this inside joke. When we traded Ray Allen, part of the thinking was in getting Gary Payton. Part of the idea was we were also going to trade Sam Cassell and get a shooting guard. Well, we were working on that with the New York Knicks, and that continued well into the night, and it ultimately fell apart. But the idea was we were going to trade Sam Cassell for Latrell Sprewell and Kurt Thomas, who was, you know, kind of in his prime at the time. So that went quite into the night, and I just remember local news camped out outside the Cousins Center. Well, that it seemed to make more sense at the time to get Sprewell instead of Cassell. when you've already, acquired Gary Payton.
Right.
But
Why not trade, your two best players and just completely flip the team with 30 something?
I was not
Makes sense.
for that part. I did not want to. I mean, it didn't make sense to me to flip Cassell for Sprewell, even roster wise. But
Well, we're going to revisit that in a little bit, but I do want to ask you guys, we're looking at about 7 minutes until the official deadline is over. If the Bucks stand pat and don't do anything, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? How are you going to feel as a Bucks fan? Are you fine with it? Are you
I'll be
pissed off? Or are you
disappointed.
somewhere in the middle?
I'll be disappointed. I'd rather stand pat than make a terrible trade, a la Tobias Harris or Ray Allen. However, will be disappointed that we didn't maximize some of our assets, namely Jared Bayless, OJ Mayo. These are expiring veterans that have some value to someone out there. Now, Bayless maybe not because he got injured last night.
well, and I don't think Mayo had any value left at this point because he's been having a terrible season.
He's been
and
having a terrible year, and he's been
so-
injured a lot too. So that is true. Bayless had some value.
He did.
Up until the injury last night. So if we stand pat,
Great
I will be
idea to have a
disappointed.
practice the night before the trade deadline.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Great idea.
Right.
Great
One
idea.
thing
Really
to
dumb.
go out there and shoot some balls or whatever. I get it. You want to get the team together. Go do a shoot around. What were they doing? Anything that could risk injury to someone who's potentially traded?
When a good time to have a good night to have a practice would have been to build team unity tonight after after these players aren't going to be traded.
Yeah, last night was a good night to have a team outing to the strip club.
Well,
Yeah,
hey,
they could have been down at Arts.
you know what? Then the Greg Monroe would have been possibly too tired and hurt himself the next day in practice like he did at Ace of Diamonds in LA.
Yeah.
So
Yes. So yeah, if we
There's
stand
a scoop.
pat, I will be a little disappointed just because I feel that there are teams out there who we could get some value from. But I would certainly rather stand pat than make a trade just to make a trade. So
Well, my only thing is clearly what they've done is it's stagnating right now because they're playing at a 500 clip or just below 500 for really since the bad start. So, I mean, it clearly is not working. You're not going in a direction of, again, bad enough to get that top pick and good enough to be a playoff team. But I don't even care about playoff team. I mean, a real contender to make some noise in the playoffs. So, again, this is just life as a Bucks fan. I think we've seen this story unfold time and time again. End up with a mediocre pick and no playoff appearance, and move on to the next year. And again, keep the train rolling.
It's hard to have any kind of enthusiasm for the rest of the season. I mean, the only things really are going to be, watching Giannis and Jabari and Middleton mainly.
and Vaughn if Bayless is injured.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, hopefully we also get to see a lot more Rashad Vaughn, and I'd also like to see Tyler Ennis. I don't need OJ Mayo playing point guard minutes. I don't need Bayless apparently is hurt now, but maybe not. We'll see what the MRI says. But
if he doesn't get minutes at this point, I mean, he clearly is doing something wrong in practice, or
I don't know. I mean, it is only Ennis's second
Chris
year,
Jackie,
so we
somebody
have
within the
we
organization
do
there.
have some more time to take a look at him, but I'd kind of like to start taking a look at him and see if he's ever going to amount to anything.
Well, a couple more tweets coming through here. Dwight Howard will stay with the Houston Rockets. A league source tells at The Vertical. I don't know what that is, but that's a Woj bomb.
That's his new podcast, Adrian
gotcha.
Wojnarowski's new podcast.
Mark Stein reporting that Ryan Anderson's not going anywhere. He will stay with the Pelicans. I thought he might be on the move. So that's just a couple more. Continuing on with the Bucks, though, does it not make sense to you guys? I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense to trade a Greg Monroe this year. I think he wanted to sign here to be on a playoff team. So if you trade him to a playoff team, there's no PR hit there. It's an easy fix to say this is what he wanted. We couldn't give it to him this year, unfortunately. So you move on because going forward with these guys that are signed to deals long term, they've become more valuable than a guy that's on an expiring contract because these salaries are going to escalate to no end. I mean, the cap's going to $20 million this coming season. I believe $20 million more after that. So guys that are signed to a longer term deal, you're probably going to see get a little bit more value than they have in years past. So a guy like Monroe,
Yes.
who's signed through next season, can opt out after that, which I imagine he will do. I would think would be more valuable now that you can get a season and a half out of him. Whereas, say, going into the offseason around draft time, you want to trade him, and then you're getting one season, he's an expiring contract. I don't think you'll see much value there. So again, I like Greg Monroe as a person. He's puts up numbers, which is great, but I just don't see the fit in Milwaukee. It's proven to be the case, especially now that he's coming off the bench, and it seems crazy to me that we're going to have a max player coming off the bench. But hey,
I think we really should have traded him. I mean, initially I didn't expect that would happen this season, but once we've dropped ourselves out of the playoffs, and once Monroe started to become interested in the idea of going elsewhere, specifically to the New Orleans Pelicans, this opened that up. Like, okay, trade him. Like, get as much value as you can for him now. I mean, hopefully we'll still do that in the offseason, but theoretically, like Jake just explained, he'll have a little bit less value than he does right now. But I don't know. It is very.
Sounds like Gasol is staying put in Chicago.
Okay. So they're going to be possibly a bubble team.
Yeah, they're going to be right there on that 7-8. It all depends on when Jimmy Butler comes back, how he, what sort of contribution he gives when he comes back. He is a game changer. But for now, they're going to be on that bubble, whether that's going to be somewhere between 7 and 10 or so.
Do you guys see, okay, I mentioned how Dwight Howard's going to be staying with Houston. There was a story that Dwight Howard tried to get Houston to trade James Harden in the same season that James Harden went to management to try to get them to trade Dwight Howard.
I actually read that this morning.
And real quickly here, it is officially 3 o'clock Eastern time. So the
all-appears
trade
quiet.
deadline in quotes is come and gone, though, as Dan has pointed out, you can still be working on a deal as long as the league office knows you're in the works.
Although also, to be fair, that's a technical rule, and Hammond doesn't do well with those kind of rules, so he probably doesn't know that. And I doubt Jason Kidd knows that. I mean, they probably do, but
as he's
it wouldn't shock me.
John Hammond has proven his prowess with the collective bargaining agreement in years past. But I don't know. Does he still insist to this day that Ramon Sessions was a unrestricted free agent when we let him go for nothing?
I don't know. He said that in multiple interviews and articles, so I'm not sure. You would hopefully he's learned that by now, but.
Well, I'm going to keep the Twitter feed going here, but in the meantime, I have a question for you guys. I'm going to ask you, what was your favorite Bucks-related trade deadline moment and your least favorite? And I guess I'll kick it off. My favorite was just last year. I was not a fan of Brandon Knight and his style, and it was pretty much right at the deadline. I'm at the gym, and I checked my Twitter feed, and right at the deadline, I'm feeling depressed, and there it is, Brandon Knight going to Philadelphia. Granted, getting Michael Carter-Williams over that Lakers pick, which was on the table, was just atrocious and a train wreck. But I remember just being excited that we made a move because I was convinced, given that the run, that little mini run that we were on, would keep them from doing it. So that was probably my favorite, and I think almost every Bucks fan, save for the guy to my left here, their least favorite would probably be the Ray Allen to Seattle trade, where we traded our franchise player who is the NBA's all-time leader in threes now, one of the greatest shooters of all time, for 2 months of a washed-up Gary Payton. And we also gave up a first-round pick in that deal for we also got Desmond Mason, nice little bench player. So, I mean, those are mine. What about you guys? Chuck, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll say my favorite was probably the John Salmons trade, just in hindsight, because it led to such a fun year. I did like what they did last year. There have been some few, but because we were there part of Squad 6 that year and the fun it led to down the season, and had the Bogut injury not happened, I still don't know what the ceiling of that team was, because they were playing as good as any team, certainly any team in the Eastern Conference post-trade deadline, and arguably any team in the NBA.
But so that I just want to ask, Chuck, so that was a little different, though, than like the Knight trade for Jake last season, because that was kind of like an immediate reaction, whereas the Salmons trade, I can't imagine that you thought when it happened.
Immediately I didn't really, I thought, okay, that
nobody did, by the way.
yeah, it was more in hindsight. That is definitely more in hindsight, just because of the joy it brought me as a fan. Because as much as, Jake and I here on pretty much every episode, we talk how we're on the tank and we want to get better draft picks. The end goal is to win games and to have fun watching them games. And that second half of that season was a lot of fun, both being in the stands, watching the road games on TV, the playoffs, almost pulling it out despite not having Bogut. That led to a really fun season. And that's the whole point here as a fan, the joy of winning games and the thought that you legitimately have a chance to win it all, which I don't think we were the favorites by any means, but pre-Bogut injury, the thought was there, even if it was a very small chance compared to some of the other teams. The possibility was there. The worst for me is definitely Ray Allen, even though as someone who lived in Seattle and used to be a Sonics fan, I liked it on the Sonics standpoint. For the Bucks, that was just absolutely horrendous. The Tobias Harris is a close second if we're talking, the last 15, 20 years or so. But that Ray Allen trade was just atrocious.
I would have to, for me, I would have to, well, I guess since we were just talking about the Ray Allen trade, I will start. I wasn't like excited about the trade, but I did. And this is how this whole inside joke came about, that I hate Ray Allen, because I did break down that trade when it happened as to the logic behind why the Bucks did it. The Bucks were carrying a top 5 payroll at the time. And we were going to be hit with a huge luxury tax bill. And that team had stagnated. I mean, this was the year after the 01-02 season that we had flamed out and went 4-15 in the last 19 games. Didn't make the playoffs even. The year after the Eastern Conference Finals year. Ray Allen, who had earlier in his career just never been injured, all of a sudden was having lower leg injury issues, and he just wasn't having a good season, and neither were the Bucks in 02-03. We had already traded Glenn Robinson that off season because Herb Cole freaked out about some off the court issues with Glenn Robinson. So we'd already broken up the Big Three team, and Ray Allen was still there, but it wasn't doing anything for us, and we were going to just bleed money. So ultimately,
thought Woj bomb. Sorry, apparently Woj just said on his podcast that the Bucks showed interest in Dwight Howard. But go on.
Terrible.
I don't get why, but sure.
So
Dan's frazzled after that Woj bomb. That just totally knocked him off.
Well, since we're frazzled, a couple other things I see. The Celtics never really made an offer for Kevin Love that was legit. But yes, the deadline is passed now. It appears that
although the deadline passed, but I have been told there is still one trade call to the league office, either about to go on or pending. Now that doesn't mean that a trade will happen, but because those things can fall apart even during the call itself. But there still might be at least one trade that happens yet.
Fair enough. Talking about that Ray Allen trade, I gotta say it was. And I've talked about it on the podcast before, but that was so emotional for me. He was my favorite Buck and still my favorite Buck of all time. But the story goes is I was a senior in high school. I was at home for lunch, and a buddy of mine had texted me, "Did you hear about the Bucks trade?" And I said, no, who do we trade? I thought something minor, and he said, "We traded Ray Allen." And I said, haha, very funny. And he was like, no, seriously, we traded Ray Allen. So I flip on ESPN, they're talking about it. And I was just gutted to the point where I felt almost paralyzed. I sat down on my couch, didn't move. I was like praying to the basketball gods that the league would find a reason to just like decline the trade, and it wasn't happening. But
you were still more emotionally invested.
Oh, absolutely.
And like I really liked Ray Allen, but I was frustrated with the last season and a half at that point.
And this was before the 15-year run of mediocrity that we were about to see that took place after that, or 13, 14, whatever it is.
That was actually, 01-02 and 02-03 were very mediocre years. That kind of kicked off that run of mediocrity, really. So the thing was that trade had the logic behind it was it had two ways of working. The Bucks weren't doing anything. They weren't going anywhere. George Karl convinced Senator Cole that, hey, we can make one more run at it with this group. Let me go get Gary Payton. And Gary Payton was having an all-star season. He was still one of the top point guards in the league. As it turned out, after we traded for him, he immediately fell off. I'm like, he just wasn't as good anymore. But he was just in the all-star game legitimately. He was having a great season. So the idea was,
there's all-stars who aren't legitimate. Kobe earned his way into the all-star game this year.
Yes, well, but the idea was we could make a run at it with Gary Payton and the rest of our team, Sam Cassell, or as I said before, Latrell Sprewell, possibly. There were just things that we wanted to try, and if that didn't work, the idea was, well, then blow it up, because Gary Payton was going to be a free agent, so we were either going to sign him if it worked, and then great, because I guess we'd be a contender. And that's when we made that trade, by the way, the national media all said, "Oh, look out for the Bucks." Like, for real. Like, people thought that this was going to be a game changer in the Eastern Conference, and they thought that the Bucks were probably the only team that could challenge the Nets that year in the Eastern Conference because of that trade. And so obviously that didn't work. The other idea was that we'd blow it up and we'd save a ton of money. Like, I did the calculations at the time that we were going to save $55 million over 2 years just by doing that, just if we just let Gary Payton walk instead of keeping Ray Allen and having to pay a huge luxury tax bill. Now, remember, that summer, Herb Cole came about a minute away from selling the team to Michael Jordan. Herb Cole pulled out at the last minute.
That would have been rest in peace for the Bucks.
It really would have been. I mean, Jordan has been he was terrible when he had a role in Washington's ownership and management, and he's been terrible with Charlotte. And he almost certainly would have moved the team. That's part of why that fell apart. Herb Cole had been bleeding money into the Bucks for years. People think he's super, super wealthy, but a lot of his valuation was tied up in the Bucks. If he had been staring at another $55 million loss while he's sitting there deciding whether to sell to Jordan,
that could have pushed it over.
That could have pushed it over. So that's why I never regret that trade as much as I liked Ray Allen, because
well, and that's, you have two sides to these trades. You always have the players on the court, and then you have the financial side, and that's why you're an expert on this, because you take more look at the financial side of things than a lot of fans do. The fans see their players, they see the guys, especially your casual fan. They just know, oh, I love Ray Allen. I've got his jersey. He's fun to watch. And then when it comes down to it, it is a business, and you see this in every sport. There's always people who are salary cap casualties, whether you can't re-sign your own player, or you have to trade someone, whatever the reason may be. It's kind of good to get that perspective and keep things grounded in reality. We do have a question here from one of our viewers. This is from Big Curdy. For those of you who post on Real GM, he's Big Curdy. A few of us know who he is outside of that. But he says, say you could trade Monroe straight up for someone, just any player, regardless of salary, and Michael Carter-Williams. Who are your ideal point guard and center players in the league to pair along with Middleton, Giannis, and Jabari? So we're going to assume that Middleton, Giannis, and Jabari are the three core. They're staying here. Any point guard, any center in the entire league. Who do you want?
I think we got to be realistic.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say so.
Well, yes, I think you do have to be realistic. You're not going to.
No Anthony Davis.
Yes. So who are you putting at center, and who are you putting at point guard with the other three players already on our roster?
It depends. I guess if I'm looking to rebuild and bring in guys that are going to grow with that core, it's going to change my answer quite a bit. If I'm looking to win now, at point guard, one name that is tossed around a lot, particularly on Real GM, is a guy like George Hill. He's kind of a guy who just plays his role. He can hit the three ball, good defender, and doesn't require a lot of usage, which is probably ideal for trying to develop Jabari, Giannis, and Chris Middleton, who's probably further along in his development. But I'll start by saying for point guard, a guy like George Hill. Dan, what do you think?
Well, I mean, in this thought exercise, it's a little tough if we're just trading Monroe and MCW. See, I wouldn't be interested in players that I can get. I want to upgrade. I want a significant upgrade. So I want to either combine Monroe and MCW for a point guard or
just say
center.
that you have.
No, I know. I'm just saying that's a struggle.
You have
for me.
picks, and don't worry about the ramifications of trading those picks and other
I'm
players.
trying to follow Kurt's rules here, but
Well, he didn't set any rules.
I thought he said straight up.
Yeah, straight up. I think what he's just saying is straight up replace one for the other. He could message us on Facebook to confirm or send another comment on the thing there. But so
Can I say Larry Sanders for center?
I don't see why not. I mean, he's not in the NBA, but I think the exercise to a certain extent.
Or how about this? Here's a name. How about Andrew Bogut? There's a guy, defender, good passer, smart team defender, block shots, rebounds, doesn't need a ton of shots, or at least the Andrew Bogut that's with Golden State right now.
Yeah,
if he's healthy and he can play.
I've watched every game he's played for Golden State. He's been an excellent player for them.
So we do have an answer from Kurt. He sent in what he wants. He wants Ibaka or Serge Ibaka for the center, and he says either Deli or Rubio for the point guard.
Dellavedova was going to be my answer just based on Kurt's criteria of it being a straight up type trade, because I feel like we could possibly get Dellavedova in a trade like that. I mean, I'd love Rubio. I was hoping the Bucks would get Rubio, but we'd have to give up a lot more than for Rubio.
Yeah, I think the exercise was more just replacing him, not really worrying about making the salaries work or even that the teams would make the trade. Other than obviously, there's a handful of untouchable guys in the entire league. You're not going to get Anthony Davis. You're not going to get LeBron. You're not going to get Steph Curry. But outside of the top 15 guys, if you come with the right price, you can probably get a team to trade. You're just going to have to overpay for some of them.
I can think of a number of point guards, but the center is the tough one there.
How about a guy like Miles Turner?
That's a great name. I would love to have Miles Turner, but again, that would be someone that we'd have to give up a lot more for than in that deal. Like I don't think Monroe would be enough.
No, I don't know if we necessarily could get Miles Turner without.
Yeah, I think it's an unrealistic trade, but that's, I think, for the game proposed to us, I think that's a good name to throw out
what?
there.
Miles Turner would probably, I have to say, he'd be my ideal semi-realistic person that we could get if we set our minds to it.
Or Frank Kaminsky, maybe?
Frank Kaminsky, it would be easier to get than Miles Turner at this point. And I would much prefer Miles Turner, but I also like Frank Kaminsky. I was interested in the Bucks getting him, in the draft.
I was just seeing what Gary Wolfel was tweeting here.
We have a Wolfel bomb. Two teams. Hold on, let me read this.
Read this in the Gary Wolfel voice.
Okay, so two teams. Okay, that the Bucks are competing against for a playoff spot. Right. Detroit and Washington both make great trades. Okay, and the Bucks stand pat. I mean, isn't that something? Isn't that something?
You've got to ask us a question that we really don't want.
Okay, what if I told you, that two teams that the Bucks are competing against both make trades, and the Bucks just stood pat? Okay.
So, well, and honestly, that's good. There was, on a different note, there's periodically the organizers of the Cream City Clash send out these emails, and we may or may not get to see them, but they sent out one yesterday looking for people for upcoming games. This is how they fill it. They have a roster of several, a couple hundred people that they fill the seats with. So the one last night, or maybe it was yesterday morning, just went over the fact that the Bucks are only 5 games out of a playoff spot. We need to bring our energy. Yeah. And I get to a certain extent.
I hated reading that
the team has to put out that as their message.
Sorry to interrupt. Got a Twitter update. Apparently, Lance Stevenson is going from the Clippers. Wow, the Clippers have traded Lance Stevenson to Memphis for Jeff Green. That is a significant trade, and I don't know what Memphis is thinking.
Memphis must be getting a first-round pick in that.
There's got to be more coming
Zach
back.
Lowe just confirmed it.
But remember, the Clippers don't have their 2017 pick. Now Toronto has that because we had it, and we gave it to Toronto for
Well, here we are
15
minutes after the trade deadline. New trades are breaking. Maybe there's hope that the Bucks did something.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I'm pessimistic, like I always am as a Bucks fan. But
yeah, this is always a tough period because, like, you're almost relieved that, okay, maybe the Bucks didn't do anything terrible, but you're like, God, I'd really like them to do something. But it's really tough.
Yeah, it's a tough situation right now. I also realize we're all wearing these headphones, which are only necessary if someone calls in because there's actually no sound coming through our headphones right now.
Well, somebody call in, please.
If
it's worth it.
Way to make us all look stupid, Chuck.
I know. I was just sitting there, I'm like, you know what? There's no sound coming out of these headphones. I should put on some music or something for backdrop music.
There's no film in this camera. Sorry. Obligatory Wayne's World reference.
So, Chuck, what about you? Who are your point guard and center that you're putting a core three with?
Someone I'd be fine. You threw out George Hill, Deladova, and Rubio. Those are all three names that I'd probably be okay with.
So Jared Bayless.
Yeah, no, not Bayless.
Awful.
But any of those three guys that we've already mentioned at point guard, at center, we talked about it on the last episode when we talked about the possibility of Larry Sanders coming back, how much of a perfect fit he would be on this team in terms of that defensive rim protector.
You got to protect the rim.
Center is really hard because there's not a lot of quality centers in the league. And for all his faults, Greg Monroe is a quality big man. He's just, in today's NBA and with our roster, he's not the best fit. So it's really hard to pick a guy who you could replace with. I know a
college guy that would be a good fit.
Yeah. Jakob Poeltl. Yes. We know we are big fans of him over here on Buck Life. I'd almost go with someone like a Porzingis to stretch the floor, provide a little shooting that our other forwards don't.
That would be outstanding.
And obviously, it's not a realistic trade. But if you get a guy who can play center but can also shoot, that covers up a weakness of where Jabari and Giannis's games are right now, in that they don't have a 3-point shot. So I guess if we're just playing Fantasyland where I could trade for any player, I'd probably say Porzingis at center just because the shooting is something our team badly needs.
Yeah, well, and I guess
it's not realistic, so don't crucify me over saying that I thought we should trade that because I know it's not going to happen.
But you know what this little exercise did here? It kind of illustrated that, just how valuable it is to have high draft picks because we're having a hard time, coming up with people that the Bucks can trade for.
Well, Real GM forums are down, so hopefully you're listening to us to get your news.
But yeah, we're having a hard time with this, and the reason is when a player is very desirable, especially at point guard and center, it can take a lot to get that player. So even somebody like Porzingis, there have been plenty of people that have scoffed at the idea of quote unquote tanking or really just, putting yourself in a position to get a higher draft pick to improve your odds of getting a better player. That's really what that is. Well, the more you do that, the more chances you get at being able to draft a player like Porzingis. What Porzingis has done for the league, a lot of people that were scoffing at picks, they just talk, the draft is a crapshoot, it's who cares? There's only one player in this draft. Yeah, well, when people were saying, this draft is just really Jahlil Okafor and Karl Anthony Towns, well, what about Kristaps Porzingis?
There's always players who come later in the first round who either surprise or someone did their homework scouting and they know they've got a gem.
Yeah.
Second round, you got them. And certainly the higher you are, and we've stressed this many times, the better your odds are at getting that player, the higher your draft pick is.
It's all a numbers game. Like when people talk about, there's no guarantee. Of course they're not. There's not a guarantee in anything. Otherwise, nobody would be interested in sports. The idea is competition and to try to best everybody else. You gain the slightest edge, especially in the NBA. There's the difference between a 50-win team and a 40-win team a lot of times can be 1.5 points per game in production, in your point differential.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah, it doesn't take much, and even the 50 and the 40, you go. There's not much of a spread between the worst team and the best team, and obviously in talent there is, but it is very much a numbers game. We want to maximize our odds at that top pick. That's, I guess, going back to what you're saying about how when you have a good center and a good point guard, especially certain positions have more value than others when you're trading. I guess that makes me even more disappointed that we didn't make a move with Greg Monroe, because I feel like his value's there. He's averaging 17 points and 10 boards a game. It's frustrating that we didn't do something there.
well, especially there are still some of the old guard or old school basketball people that are running teams in the NBA, and they're more interested in a player like Greg Monroe, who's, I think he might be top 5 in the NBA in double doubles and points and
Wolfelbaum, by the way.
Yes.
Well, first off, quick update. The Clippers sent a heavily protected 2019 first-round pick to Memphis in exchange.
Heavily protected.
Yes.
Wow.
Also, Gary Wolfel says, look for Bucks to revisit trade talks with Minnesota and Atlanta for Ricky Rubio and Jeff Teague in the summer, especially with only one legit point guard in this draft, referring to Chris Dunn, which, draft expert Gary, thanks. So we don't have any bitterness or resentment for that man at all.
So
on this show.
I was going to say something. I don't remember what it was before this bomb. I lost my train of thought.
See, it's the Wolfel bombs.
Yeah, the Wolfel bombs just throw everything out of whack. What were we talking about right before that?
So we were talking about the
old school teams. This brings us back. I think it was 2-3 episodes ago. We had quite a conversation about how is John Hammond still the draft or the GM of the league. I think you might have been.
Yes. I compared John Hammond to Jar Jar Binks.
This is just showing that the Bucks, all the more reason for them to move in a different direction. And I don't think that direction is Jason Kidd. Look at you don't have to go that far. Just look down the street from the Bucks to the Brewers and what they're doing with a 33-year-old GM.
30. David Stearns is 30.
Not even 30. I thought he was in his early 30s. So he's 30 years old. You do not need to have 30 years of experience to be a GM. There's let's draft Grand Admiral for GM. We'll start it here.
I mean, look, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I definitely could do a better job than Hammond. I'll put that right out there. I will. I
love it.
He's on the record. It is officially part of the record here. Dan Helsel would be a better GM than. I mean,
I'm kind of setting the bar low for myself there, but
hey, that's a former executive of the year, so you got your ways to go.
You have to win an executive of the year to back up that claim, or a championship, one or the other.
One or the other. Okay.
Yeah, one or the other.
I will get right on that.
But that is kind of you when you were talking about the old guard of the NBA, the old line of thinking that made me even more frustrated that we haven't brought in someone young. And to be fair, a lot of NBA teams, there's a lot more young GMs in baseball than I've seen in basketball.
Yes.
And I don't know what exactly
in basketball, they all look like the Emperor from Star Wars.
That is very true. In baseball, teams have not been afraid to go with young guys as their GM, and it's for the most part seeming to pay off. You look at some of the young teams that have rebuilt very quickly, Houston last year, and hopefully the Brewers in a few years. It would be nice to see the Bucks do something cutting edge there and take a chance with a young guy who's big into stats and analytics and can go to that next level of thinking.
Eric Wickman just texted me. David Stearns turned 31 today.
Oh, there you
Way
go.
to be on top of it, buddy.
I guess we know one person who's listening live to us.
We just got fact checked live on the air.
There we go. David Stearns, 31 years old as of today.
But, all right, guys.
We were close.
Moving forward, where are the Bucks going to go for the rest of the season from here? Where do you see them finishing, and what's the mindset going to be at the end of the season? Like, when we look back on this season, what are we going to think about? Is it going to be just another blah year that you don't remember?
Before we get into that, we do have a viewer saying that you need to flex more. We need more flexing from Jake. They need to see all the
deal with it.
Little Clay Matthews there. And then we'll get on to the.
Who the fuck said that?
Is Sarah watching?
No, I believe that was Eric.
Oh,
given the name of the user, it doesn't say.
Oh yeah,
that's like something he would.
You're welcome, buddy.
That is 100% sure, Eric.
So yeah, I know that was an alias he's used in the past. So I was kind of assuming that was Eric Wickman. So we're talking about the attitude going forward for the rest of the season. Go ahead, I'll let Dan take this one first.
Well, I mean, I hope that it's about playing the young guys and kind of seeing their growth and having some optimism about them going forward. Let's see, maybe we can see some next steps from Giannis. I'd be more surprised if Giannis really took a leap here, because he's already kind of done that. But I'd like to see Jabari, especially. If we can get something that will make us confident about Jabari Parker going into next season, that will be huge. It will be big if we can have some optimism about Rashad Vaughn, maybe some kind of semblance with Tyler Ennis that he will be a rotation player. So that's the only thing that I can really hope for going
That's your
forward.
optimism level is just development.
Yeah,
it's the only thing.
I think we've been talking youth for a while on this show, and I'd have to second that. For me, Giannis, pretty much every season he's been in the league, he's kind of taken a nice step forward at the beginning, and you see it right from the start of a season. So hopefully we get that next year. I don't expect much from Giannis this year, but next year I want Giannis to be playing at an all-star level. For the rest of this season, I agree. Let's see Jabari. He's been back from the injury. Great. You see the explosiveness. You see the dunks. Let's see that shot fall a little more. Let's see what he's got. Give me some hope that next year he's going to potentially play at an all-star level. Let's see Vaughn more. Vaughn and Ennis have not been getting enough minutes for my liking. And maybe this Bayless injury will lead to some of that. And it's not like these teams wait till today to do the talking. So maybe they've been talks and the Bucks realized there was not as much value for Bayless as they would like. And maybe that's why this injury is coming about. I don't like to get too conspiracy theorist here, but it wouldn't be the first time in the NBA there's been a phantom injury to a veteran player.
Well, and a lot of times with those
timing is weird.
With those kind of phantom injuries, a lot of times there is an injury. It's just they could play
pull it out
through
of proportions a little bit. Yeah, that guy's got, because at this point in most sports, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, these seasons are long. By the time you get halfway, 3/4 down, everyone's got some sort of nagging injury, whether it's a little cramping, or in football they often play through broken bones and stuff. You'll see a guy out there with a club, not quite playing with a club on your hand in basketball, but
Delfino almost had to wear a helmet.
Yeah. Oh my gosh!
I was so regretful that never happened. I needed to see it. Well, for me, the whole development thing, it goes hand in hand with Jason Kidd's coaching, and how he has his rotation for the rest of the season is going to be very telling for me. As you said, is he going to play Tyler Ennis over somebody who's worthless to the future of this team, like a Jared Bayless, Rashad Vaughn instead of an OJ Mayo? Even down to, Johnny O'Brien, if you don't think much of him, I don't think much of him, but see what you have.
Absolutely.
He showed some flashes early in this season.
Yeah, that he could be a rotation player.
Some hustle. He was hitting a mid-range jump shot. He was rebounding okay. I don't want to say he was a good rebounder, but he wasn't the terrible black hole that he was last season. So I certainly don't know why his minutes disappeared into we were never really given any reason. He was a rotational guy getting minutes, and then he wasn't.
People return from injury.
Yeah, but he was playing well enough that he earned some more minutes in my mind, especially as a young player. So I'd like to see him get some more minutes. Ennis, Vaughn. The other thing personally and we'll start talking about this more in upcoming episodes, is now we turn our attention to the draft, because we're not. Make no mistake, we're 5 games out of the playoff spots. Our chances of making the playoffs are still very slim, because there's a lot of teams ahead of us for those 5 games. And as Gary Wolfel was apt to point out, 2 of them made trades to potentially improve. I'm not sure that Washington improves. We'll see how Markieff Morris works out there.
Yeah, he's a wild card for sure.
If it works out, they very well could improve and be a better team if he gets his head on straight. But certainly I think Detroit improved. Washington, that's very much a wild card. But it's not just that we're 5 games back. We're 5 games back of quite a few teams, and I will go on the record saying I don't think we're making the playoffs. I don't want to say 100% because anything could happen.
I will say 100%.
There you go. Dan says 100%.
100%. We are not making the playoffs unless there's some trade that goes through that that hasn't been reported yet.
Yeah. So for me, going forward, it's the young guys, specifically Vaughn and Ennis, and then throwing Johnny O'Brien as a third, and the draft.
And before we get to the draft, we've mentioned almost everybody that we want to see, like, young guys get opportunities. Obviously, Chris Middleton is still young-ish, and he's playing, so we're not. That's why we haven't mentioned him. But it would be nice to see more consistency out of him.
Yes,
because
we talked about that last episode pretty heavily. He has been he'll have games, and we specifically talked about it, where he is just on fire, shooting better than anyone in the league, and then he'll have dry spells. And it reminded me, I made the comparison last episode to Ersan Ilyasova, where he has games where he is the best, almost the best player in the league, and games where he's just meh.
I'm also interested in seeing us continue to use him as a facilitator on offense. I mean, putting the ball in his hands and letting him be a playmaker. He's done very well at that. I did not think that was going to be a really significant aspect of his game, but it has been. That kind of happened while Kidd was away and Prunty was coaching the team, and I'd like to see that continue. And another person that I didn't mention because I just have very little faith in him at this point, amounting to anything, is John Henson. And he's still young-ish. He's on the last year of his rookie scale contract. He came out of college a little bit older, but he's, it's his fourth year in the league. I don't really expect him to develop at this point. And I just don't know. John Henson is very much an enigma to me. He's a little smallish, doesn't really have, for a center, bulk-wise, maybe you can do that in today's NBA. But he also he just doesn't seem to possess the drive to succeed. And I don't know what do you guys think about John Henson going forward?
He likes to drive to Chipotle.
He does.
I certainly, and he's been injured. I don't know where his injury sits at right now, but certainly, especially if Monroe continues to come off the bench, Henson has to be the starter. I understand right now he's injured and it's been Miles Plumlee, but once Henson is ready to go, the starter cannot continue to be Miles Plumlee. I'm okay going forward. If we keep Monroe next year, I'm perfectly okay bringing him off the bench. I actually think it's a better fit for him.
As far as winning games.
Yeah, as far as winning games. Henson has to be the starter in that scenario. It can't be some scrub like Miles Plumlee.
Are you guys comfortable with Henson, as the center of the foreseeable future for the Bucks?
The thing is with Henson, and it wasn't that long ago that I looked back at his game logs and kind of calculated when he gets significant minutes, as in 25 minutes or so or more in a game, he puts up great numbers. He's not a guy that you can give spot minutes to that's going to come in and fill up the stat sheet and then go back to the bench and be ready again. So maybe some consistency, not only in being a starter, but also getting starter minutes would be huge as far as rebuilding that value, or at least seeing what you have in Henson as a player. He seems to be a great teammate, although I get a little annoyed when he makes the mental mistakes on the court and he just laughs it off every time. That really, really is starting to bother me.
Well, speaking of the mental, we got a comment here that Henson has Andrew Wiggins syndrome.
Oh, God.
Capacity. So,
I know who said that comment.
He said he's specifically Henson has Andrew Wiggins syndrome. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
wow.
Well, I wouldn't trade Henson for Andrew Wiggins either, because Andrew Wiggins isn't alpha enough. But we'll move on from that, because I could go on and on about Andrew Wiggins and how awesome he is. But no, Henson, ideally, you look at his skill set, you would think that that's something that the Bucks would be interested in giving more minutes to. I mean, his shot blocking is always great, at least on a per minute basis or per 36, however you want to look at it. He's a lead in that level. And coming into the league, he was a good rebounder. I don't really know what's happened to him. But again, I think a lot of that has to do with the inconsistency. So part of that is on Kidd, but I'm sure part of that is on John Henson, maybe not having great practice habits or proving himself enough to earn those minutes.
And sometimes the game itself, he just looks like he's out there sleepwalking or has no desire to play sometimes. So that does contribute to him not getting more minutes in that particular game.
his best game this year was the New York game when they were pulling his jersey and kind of got him pissed off.
Don't pull his jersey, brah.
Yeah, exactly. So you're right that sometimes it looks like he's sleepwalking through the games, and that fire is not necessarily there. So
maybe we need to bring in like a dominatrix to just slap him around a little bit before each game, get him. These are all thoughts that go through my head.
Whatever it takes, maybe if we had a young, inspirational GM who he might think outside the box.
Who was
like
into
that.
BDSM?
But yeah, he's into BDSM. He's going to put a dungeon in the new arena and, do whatever it takes.
The design of the arena gets delayed so we can add a red room of pain.
Just a reminder, this is not always a kid's show. Luckily, some of that your kids will go right over their heads. It's amazing. Kind of off topic here, but you go back and you watch like movies and you see these jokes that went completely over your head as a kid. Yes. Even in movies like Toy Story, where it's a kid's movie, but there's jokes that will go completely over your head if you're under a certain age. So luckily we keep it somewhat clean, other than the 4-letter words. But this is not a kid's show.
Well, you guys want to close this out positive and talk a little draft? That's really what we have to
that is, unless we get something breaking here at the 11th hour.
Yes, we did not trade our draft pick, so there's a positive.
That is a positive, especially since our draft pick should be decent this year. Hopefully, as the season goes on, that is improving. It'll be interesting because we've talked about it. The low point, the early low point for the Bucks was 10-18. They were 8 games under 500, and as we sit today, after the trade deadline, we are 10 games under 500. So that means for the last 25 games, we've been playing at 500. I know it's 2 games under 500, but that's not where you want to be in the NBA. So.
Hey, we could win a top 3 pick in the lottery.
Yeah, that's true. We certainly.
To me, that's the positive. That's all I have left as far as really.
And we're what, 7th worst record or 8th worst record right now? We're 7th or 8th. We're right there in that 7th or 8th spot. I'm not going to look it up. Normally, when we're recording these things, I've got my laptop, my desktop.
We're 7th.
We've got several computers going at once right now because of this setup for the live show. I don't have access to all of that. But so we're tied for 7th.
If we would have lost those 2 stupid, pointless wins that we got just before the deadline, we would be in 6th ahead of New Orleans. So as far as the tanks
and realistically, all those teams behind it, we could easily catch New Orleans and probably even Minnesota, Brooklyn, Phoenix, the Lakers, and Philadelphia. Those are all going to be really hard to catch. They're so far ahead of us in the tank standings. So. Getting to 5, though, isn't unreasonable, which gives you a legit shot at a top 3 pick. And even if you don't get a top 3 pick, you're probably looking at a top, 6 or 7 pick at worst.
Yeah.
And that's a lot better than where we are right now, where we're looking at somewhere between 7 and 9 is probably realistically where you're picking if you get a jump.
But I mean, we deserve to jump into the top 3 to the number 1 pick. Especially, we just deserve that. I know we've hit it before when we shouldn't have the
Andrew Bogut.
Yes, we had a 6% chance of doing that. I think we had the 6th worst record.
We did.
And but I've seen other teams have jumped up. I mean, I hate the lottery system, but that's what we have.
We had the year where we got jumped 3 times when we had the 3rd worst record. We had the year where we had the worst record and got jumped by Cleveland, who certainly didn't deserve the number 1 overall pick.
Yes, Cleveland has lucked their way.
Their share of number 1.
Yes, it's ridiculous.
So we are due for some luck there, though that's not how it works, allegedly.
Based on where we are now, I'm just gonna project it to where we are now because it's unlikely we jump into top 3. So. As of now, the top 3 players consensus are Ben Simmons, who's consensus number 1, although there has been some chatter that perhaps Brandon Ingram, who's been the consensus number 2 guy from Duke, the freshman, could jump up and maybe catch him. And then the consensus number 3 would be Dragan Bender, power forward from Croatia, who's got a little bit of Porzingis in his game. I don't think he's quite the athlete, but he's 7'1". He can move really, really well for a big man, and he's a good passer.
After that, always get drafted high if they've got skill sets. So that's not that's probably be surprising if anyone else went top 3, barring an injury between now and the draft.
And if you look at a lot of mocks after that, it gets really fluid as far as who could go where. I'm looking at Draft Express right now. They've got the 4th pick as Chris Dunn, the point guard from Providence, as mentioned by Gary Wolf earlier. Though, if you want a new point guard, I don't know if Chris Dunn is the guy that you would want. A lot of people think he plays similarly to Michael Carter-Williams. Not really a great shooter, hasn't been over his college career. Then you look at guys like Jaylen Brown. I'm just going to look at guys that our 2 biggest weaknesses are probably going to be center and point guard. Jakob Pertl is a guy who's been mocked to the Bucks in quite a few mock drafts. I think he's a slam dunk pick if he's available to you. He's a 7-footer from Utah, multifaceted, not a ton of range, but again, a good passer, a good defender, and just seems to be a guy that is going to play his role, not going to need the ball in his hand. So it's always good to have a low usage guy when you have guys like Jabari, Giannis, and Chris Middleton in your starting 5. And then you look at Jamal Murray, the freshman from Kentucky, who's probably considered more of a combo guard than a true point guard. Scala Bissier, who is for a while considered to be the consensus number 2 guy, the 7-footer from Kentucky, rail thin, but I don't know, hasn't shown a lot, but the potential is there. I keep getting texts about Buddy Hield. I don't know. For me, he doesn't do it. He's a scorer, one of the best players in the country, but he's a senior guard from Oklahoma. If we're going to go that route, I think everybody knows I'm after a certain Duke player, Grayson Allen. That's my bae. Yeah. That's my boo.
Yeah. So, my problem with Chris Dunn, and it would be the same with Bobby Hield, is these guys are 22 years old. They're old. They're at this point, they are what they are. They should improve a little bit with NBA conditioning and going through training camp and the coaching and all that. But their upside compared to where they are now is minimal. So, if we're talking draft, when you get these top draft picks, I'd much rather take the chance on someone who's younger. So for me, my top pick would definitely be realistically where we're picking now. And your phone's ringing. I don't know if you need to answer that or not.
I do not.
Where we're picking now, I would certainly like Jakob Pertl. That's probably the top target that's realistic for where we're looking at right now.
That's who I would like as well.
So obviously between now and the draft, we have some control over this in terms of what product we put out on the court. We could potentially improve that draft pick. And then with the lottery balls, we will see what happens between now and then. But realistically, Jakob Pertl is who I think all 3 of us would love him where we're realistically picking.
Realistically, I want us to get the number 1 pick.
Well, yes. And if we got the number 1 pick, I'm assuming we're all on board for Ben Simmons here?
Yes.
Or do we have anyone who's breaking that with Ingram?
For a long time, I was very much Simmons or bust if I have number 1. But Brandon Ingram's really showing me some things for Duke, and he has a skill set that's going to be more ready to contribute now, despite being younger. He looks a lot like Kevin Durant, body-wise, very long, gangly to a point, but can shoot the 3 ball. Struggled a little bit. He played last night against North Carolina, but Duke ended up winning that game, and he came up big down the stretch, particularly defensively. So he would fit in for the all-length team that we seem to be going for. So I think if we were able to get him, you could possibly see him play at the small forward spot. You could have Middleton at the 2, Jabari at the power forward spot, and maybe Giannis at center if they ever want to look at that experiment, which I wish they would.
I'm willing to settle for that one if we only get the number 2 pick.
Yeah, I could be convinced either way between the 2 of them.
The interesting thing about Simmons is that he's 6'10", but a lot of guys think that he could play point guard in the NBA given his court vision. And he racks up assists, and he's an athletic freak. If you get a guy like that, you can, again, he would fit in with the Bucks in that they don't really have set positions for guys. They just kind of play the matchup. So you have him play a point on offense, and then defense, you can put him wherever you need to.
You can argue to a certain extent that LeBron James has played point guard for a lot of his career with his teams. He's been the distributor for his teams, and I'd have no problem with Ben Simmons playing that type of role, especially when you surround him with the rest of the players we have on our team. They're pretty good. Giannis is a good passer. You have good passers on the team, and you're right that we don't. The idea of defined roles you don't need to have defined roles, especially on offense. If you have enough talent, you can make it work with the right coach. I could be convinced either way. If we lucked into the number 1 pick, if we maximized our odds and the lottery balls fell the right way, I could be convinced either one. I think I'm still a Ben Simmons guy, but you're right that as the season of college basketball has gone on, the gap between him and Ingram has been closing, and depending what they do down the stretch in the tournament, and then assuming they both come out, then what you see at the combine, I could be swayed to go for Ingram if we got that number 1 pick.
You know, since we've been talking about the pleasant fantasy of jumping to the number 1 pick, or at least top 3, and we've also been talking about Scott Skiles today. It reminds me of a very, very amusing time during the 2008, May of 2008, the NBA draft lottery. I'm actually in the courtside club at the Bradley Center with a few season ticket holders. And this is shortly after we hired Scott Skiles. So I'd been talking to Skiles a bunch, and I was actually standing next to him when they did the drawing. And remember, he had just been fired from the Bulls that previous season, in the middle of the season. So, and the Bucks had a terrible record that year. So we're hoping to get a top 3 pick, or the top 1. We don't. We end up sticking with the 8th pick, of course. Joe Alexander.
I think we got jumped that year. I think
we did. We did. We got jumped by the Chicago Bulls. So
that's right. That was the year they got up and got
Derrick Rose. Yes. So Skiles had just left there. He had just came from there, and I'm standing next to Skiles. You should have seen his face when it was like the Bulls. He didn't say anything. He didn't swear, but he just, if you've ever seen Scott Skiles with that look on his face that's just about to like boil over,
pretty much what he looks like all the time,
and choke. I thought he might like start to choke me out.
Does have a little bit of resting bitch face, you know. We'll just say that.
But yeah, that was one of the that was my first personal interaction with Scott Skiles, and like I said, I talked to him a bit.
Run away.
I talked to him a bit before that, and he was a very pleasant guy prior to that. But after that, he was just pissed off the rest of the evening. So that event ended very quickly after that, because Skiles just like I think he may have stormed out.
I'm going to throw a couple more names out here in the draft just because I'm selfish, and I'm going to throw out the names that I like that are maybe some sleeper picks. Number 1, if around where we're picking, where some people may call it a homer pick, but Henry Ellenson is by all accounts looking like a top 10 pick. If he could play center in the NBA, I could be okay with that pick, given that how the NBA is nowadays, and that the center doesn't need to be your giant plotting guy anymore necessarily. But another name that I think is going to shoot up the boards a little bit is it's a Chinese kid named Zhu Qi, and he's 7'2" with a 7'7" wingspan. He's got ball skills. He can handle the ball at 7'2". He's got a little bit of a mid-range jumper, and he blocks shots at an insane rate. If there's anybody in this draft that I think could come out of nowhere and maybe be that Miles Turner type, I don't know about having a 3-point shot in that, but I think the Zhu Qi has the physical profile, and he is just 20 years old. He just turned 20, so he still has a lot of potential too. So those are some of the guys I'm looking at maybe for sleepers. And of course, I'm in love with Grayson Allen, Duke shooting guard. That guy's a gamer.
Where are they projecting Grayson Allen to go right now?
Draft Express does not have him coming in this draft. They think he's going to stay another year, which I have heard. I don't think it would be smart for him to do so, given the season he's having. But hey,
and the weakness of this, and the projected weakness of this draft. If he's having that good of a season, he'd go a lot higher in this draft theoretically.
Yeah,
than 2017.
The 2017 draft is currently projected to be very strong, versus this one is very weak. So a lot can change in the next year, but yeah.
Well, that's a funny thing about drafts too, because you hear in so many other years, like, this is a weak draft, this is a strong draft. Well, look at the draft that the Bucks got, Jabari. That was supposed to be the strongest draft in years, and a generation.
The Giannis draft was a weak draft.
Yeah,
it was.
And you even last year's draft was supposed to be very, very weak. And you end up getting Porzingis, Miles Turner was late, Cameron Payne went late.
Karl Anthony Towns is phenomenal.
Karl Anthony Towns
it was thought to be good at the very top and then nothing. But
but
like Jake said, there were some good players in there.
So that's why I don't like the argument when people talk about acquiring draft picks. Like, well, this year's draft sucks. That's stupid. Well, shut up. You don't know. It's not an exact science. So it's dumb to disregard a draft because
you can definitely find good players in there. Now since there's talk that we might resume an attempt to trade for Ricky Rubio in the offseason, once our draft position is known after the draft lottery, let's say it's not top 3, let's say it's
8th, 9th,
9th, 10th, would you be okay with that draft pick going to Minnesota as part of a deal for Ricky Rubio?
For me, it depends on where the team is going, what the rest of the roster looks like. I like the idea of Ricky Rubio because he is a true point guard in the sense that he has incredible court vision. He finds guys in their best spot.
Yes, do yourself a favor, anybody, and just look up Ricky Rubio highlights on YouTube.
Oh, he's dynamic. He's reminiscent of Pistol Pete as far as in the open court, what he can do with the ball in his hands. He can't shoot from deep, so again, he doesn't solve that problem. But I think when you look at maybe not necessarily the impact on wins and losses, but the impact of developing Jabari and Giannis's games and getting them more open opportunities, you can't really measure the impact there. So in that range, it's something I'm looking into. And also, I'm the prerequisite is Greg Monroe has to move on because he just doesn't. Right. You can't keep him and have him coming off the bench as a max player. He's gone after next year. At the end of whatever before next season, he has to go. Regardless of any trade scenarios with Ricky Rubio.
Yeah, I think the idea would be that you utilize the assets of Greg Monroe, Michael Carter-Williams, and then potentially you're probably going to have to use either that 2016 first-round pick and or Rashad Vaughn and get Rubio plus something.
Well, I guess that is really more of a discussion for down the road once we know where our pick sits and what's going on. I don't like to speculate too much, but Jake's got to make sure his hair is good here. We promised you we'd go till 3 o'clock Central. There's nothing much left to talk about with the Bucks not making a move. This deadline was more about what didn't happen, but this was our first live event. Potentially come back for more. It was fun chatting with all you guys. Had a few people interact, and we will put this up on like a normal podcast for those of you that download and watch. Hopefully you followed up. Not much happened. A very uneventful trade deadline, even not just for the Bucks, but I think overall throughout the entire league, this was kind of an uneventful trade deadline. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but
definitely
the Markieff Morris trade was kind of I didn't see that coming, but overall, not a lot happened. No one really moved other than a few small chips here and there. So,
well, one thing that you didn't have this trade deadline as opposed to past trade deadlines is that teams didn't really need to dump a lot of salary. The expiring contracts were worth virtually nothing because the cap is going up so much this offseason that everybody's going to have sufficient cap space. They're not going to give away positive assets just to dump salary.
Yeah, so we're going to have probably a couple of years like this where there's, because we're expecting the salary cap to increase quite a bit over the next few seasons. This will probably
happen next season as well.
Yeah.
It depends how much teams blow money this
right.
season.
That's it. The salary cap's going to go up for the next few years, and eventually teams are going to find themselves where they've destroyed their salary cap and they need to make those trades again. But it might be a couple years until that happens.
Yes, there will continue to be foolish moves made by foolish GMs. Hopefully we won't have a foolish GM for much longer.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to about wrap it up here. We will see you guys for the next episode. Probably a week and a half or so. We'll put out another normal episode. But thanks to those of you that listened and watched live. And we'll be back at your audio waves here with maybe something. We'll be able to talk about what the Bucks look like post-trade deadline and post-Bayless injury. And maybe seeing more of these young guys. You guys all have a good one.
Grayson Allen.